So, let's talk about a moment that literally rewired the entire planet, the age of European exploration. We're going to dig into the powerful mix of reasons that push ships across terrifying, unknown oceans and, in doing so, completely change the path of human history forever.
Okay, so just picture it. It's the late 1400s. For pretty much any European, the world is what you see right here. This is it. And then, bam, in the span of just one person's lifetime, everything is turned upside down. So the big question is, why? What could possibly be strong enough to make them sail right off the edge of their own map?
Well, it turns out the answer can be boiled down to three really powerful words: gold, glory, and God. This is the incredible mix of greed, ambition, and faith that we are going to unpack. This is the combination that literally set the world on a new course.
All right, so let's dive in and break these down one by one. Because if you can understand these drivers, you don't just get why they sailed, you get the world-changing consequences that came after.
First up, gold. Now this seems pretty obvious, right? But it's actually way more complex than just a simple treasure hunt. This was about solving a massive, and I mean massive, economic crisis that Europe was facing.
So, here was the big problem. Europeans had a serious craving for luxury goods from Asia. We're talking spices like pepper and cloves, beautiful silks, but to get them, they had to rely on land routes, like the famous Silk Road. The issue was, these routes were controlled by a long chain of middlemen, and at every single step, the price would jump higher and higher. Europe's precious gold and silver was just pouring out. So finding a direct sea route, that wasn't just about getting rich. For countries like Portugal, it was about economic survival. They had to find a way to cut out the middlemen before they went broke.
And that huge economic pressure? Well, it leads us right into our second G, glory. We're talking about an era of intense national rivalry. This was about power, prestige, and proving that your nation was the one everyone else should be afraid of. It was bragging rights, but on a global scale.
To really get this hunger for glory, you've got to remember what was happening in Europe at the time. The continent was just starting to get back on its feet after the horrors of the Black Death. With that recovery, powerful, centralized monarchies were popping up, especially in places like Spain and Portugal. And these new ambitious kings and queens, they wanted to expand their power. Funding a crazy voyage into the total unknown was the ultimate power move. Discovering new lands, finding new wealth, that was the fastest way to become the top dog.
And that brings us to the final, and for some, the most powerful piece of this puzzle: God. You know, this wasn't just some side quest. For many, it was a core, ideological mission that was every bit as powerful as the pull of gold or the promise of glory.
This religious drive was especially intense in Spain. The monarchs, Ferdinand and Isabella, had just wrapped up the Reconquista, a war that lasted centuries to unify their country under the Catholic faith. That victory created this incredibly powerful religious mission that was baked right into Spain's identity. For them, finding new people to convert to Christianity, that wasn't an afterthought, it was a divine command.
So we have the motives: gold, glory, and God. But having the will to do something is only half the battle, right? You also need the tools. What actually changed technologically that finally made these insane voyages even possible? Let's take a look inside the explorer's toolkit.
You just can't cross a massive, unknown ocean without the right gear. And three big innovations were absolute game changers. First, the ship itself, the Caravel. It was way faster, way more nimble, and, this is the crucial part, it could actually sail against the wind. Second, navigation. Sailors got really good with tools like the astrolabe, which let them figure out where they were in the middle of a vast, empty ocean just by looking at the stars. And third, control. The stern post rudder gave them so much more steering power. These weren't just little upgrades, they made the impossible possible.
So, with this new tech, the race was officially on. And it was a two-horse race, really. Portugal versus Spain. Portugal, under Prince Henry the Navigator, was playing the long game. They were slowly, methodically charting their way south around Africa. But as Portugal started getting richer and richer from this strategy, Spain got antsy. They needed a shortcut. They needed a big, risky gamble to jump ahead of their rival. And that gamble was to sail west, straight across the unknown Atlantic.
And that huge gamble rests on the shoulders of one man, and one, let's be honest, fateful mistake. We're talking, of course, about Christopher Columbus and his accidental discovery.
So, with Spain's money in his pocket, Columbus takes off in August of 1492.
He is absolutely convinced he can find that shortcut to Asia by just sailing west. By October, his crew spots land. He has his first encounters with the local people, and by the next spring, he's back in Spain to report on what he found.
But here's the thing. He was totally and completely wrong about where he'd landed. He hadn't reached the East Indies. He absolutely had not found a new route to the spice markets of Asia. So, by his own mission's standards, he'd failed. But what he stumbled upon, well, that was going to be way, way bigger than some spice route.
He noticed something small, something that would change everything. The local people were wearing little bits of gold jewelry. And that was it. That was the moment. The message he sent back to his sponsors wasn't about new maps or trade winds. It was brutally simple. There is gold here, and there is more for the taking. That message lit a fire. It started a frenzy that changed the entire mission, almost overnight, from exploration to pure extraction and conquest.
And this is the moment. This is where one man's mistake blows up into a world-altering event. This accident triggered a collision between two worlds that had been completely separate for thousands and thousands of years.
Historians have a name for what happened next, the Columbian Exchange. But don't let the simple name fool you. This was the massive, chaotic, unprecedented transfer of everything. Plants, animals, diseases, people, technology, all of it moving between the Eastern and Western hemispheres for the very first time. It was one of the single most important events in the history of life on Earth.
I mean, just stop and think about that for a second. Two gigantic biological and cultural ecosystems, each one evolving in total isolation for millennia, suddenly crashing into one another. This wasn't just two cultures meeting. This was like two planets colliding. The consequences were enormous, they were unpredictable, and for millions of people, they were absolutely devastating.
So when you trace it all back, that potent mix of economic desperation, nationalistic pride, and religious fervor kicked off a chain reaction that nobody, and I mean nobody, could have ever seen coming. It's just a wild reminder of how very focused human motivations can have these huge cascading consequences.
So I'll leave you with this question to think about. Of those three big motivators, gold, glory, and God, which one do you think ended up casting the longest shadow? Which of those forces from all those centuries ago has had the most lasting impact on the world you woke up in this morning?